Failed lead gen services are one of the most consistent problems that I hear from financial advisors, and it really prevents them from being able to grow their book. Regardless of what type of lead gen service it is, it really holds them back because they feel like they're burning money down the drain and aren't able to actually find those qualified, ideal prospects that they need to move their practice forward. So in this video, I'm going to break down the consistent factor across any lead gen service that causes them to not deliver that consistent result. And hopefully in this video, you just learn one way that you can solve that problem and actually move past it to actually grow your book consistently. So before we really get into it, the one thing that I want to make clear is that the reason these lead gen services fail isn't because every single one of the businesses itself or the people in the businesses is bad. That's not really what I'm saying. It's the model of outsourcing your outreach to a lead gen service that has an inherent flaw, which is what I'm going to explain here. But even beyond that, there's some very specific details that, when you think about it logically and the way I'm going to break it down here, it's very obvious why these lead gen services consistently fail over and over again. So I'm not getting into talking about specific companies or why they may or may not be good or bad, filled with good or bad people. That's not really the point. It's really understanding the motive behind the outreach and behind the prospecting, which is what causes these failures. So let's jump into it here on the screen. What you can see, with the lead gen that we're talking about, every single model could be different, right? There's different ways that you can do it. Obviously, we have automation agencies. We have, buying leads with SmartVestor, Smart Assets, services like that. There's agencies, which may be cold calling the names that you have on LinkedIn, whatever the case may be. Paid ads, right? So this is another really, really common model that I see in the lead gen space for financial advisors. You'll run ads on Facebook. There'll be some type of, lead magnet that you want to get opted in for. In order for the prospects to opt into lead magnet, they have to go ahead and put in their name and their number or something, and they may have to book in a call. These are generally speaking the most common lead gen services that advisors go with, especially the automation agencies. That's probably the most common one. But the real reason why these don't work at a surface level is because of the relationship that they lack. I'm pretty sure every single advisor watching this is going to tell me that their industry is very relationship first. It's one of the, if not the most trust-based industry out there. And the reality is with all of this outreach is that you're losing that personal connection that you're getting with those prospects, right? Every single one of your clients has a reason why they work with you specifically and not another advisor. And that's what these lead gen services are lacking. And it's not really about, maybe they're using your message or they're using something unique about you, but that actual relationship that's built with a direct conversation with you as an advisor, that's what these lead gen services are lacking, right? It doesn't come from automation. It doesn't come from trying to blast cold AI messages. It doesn't come from trying to buy leads from people that have just opted in randomly online somewhere with just looking for general help from an advisor. The way that outreach actually works and why prospecting actually works, which we're going to get into, but I need you to understand that it's the relationship behind every single prospect that actually moves it forward, especially the more higher value relationships that you're having. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. Every single person wants that relationship with their advisor. So getting into that, right? As I said, the reason your clients actually buy is because they trust you, and any real relationship before you even talk about finances is what these lead gen services are lacking, right? If you're pitching people, if you're talking about whatever this X, Y, and Z solution you have, even if you're offering a free resource, think you're providing value, if it lacks the relationship that actually makes it a human, that's what is going to prevent them from moving forward consistently, right? And again, the biggest piece here is not saying that you'll never get any leads from a lead gen service. Obviously, some people do, but the main problems are one, that it's very, very inconsistent. There's very big peaks and valleys. The reason that happens is it's honestly just very luck-based, right? If you're pitching or using any of these types of things on this side, it really just comes down to luck, right? Hopefully you come across someone that has enough interest to actually move forward on that call with you, or you have, enough interest to get someone on that call in the first place. Then the second most common problem is once you do get people onto a discovery or a connection call, whatever you want to call it, they're not actually interested or qualified enough to move forward. It's a very low quality lead. Again, the reason that happens is because they don't have a relationship with you. You don't actually know their true problem until you get on that call. And so every single time you're starting from scratch, right? Whereas if you already have a relationship with a prospect, or, you actually built trust in a proper manner, by the time you're ever speaking to them, they owe you the respect of actually showing up to the call, explaining their situation. And that's what's actually going to move that forward, right? And that's the real big difference between having a relationship with a prospect versus a cold stranger that you're just somehow kind of gotten onto this call. So that's really the biggest piece. Again, here it's context on who they're talking to, just giving a little bit of a spiel on your background or who you help. That's not really building a relationship, right? That's just something general that really any advisor can do. And again, the biggest piece is that with all these lead gen services, it's very recurring, right? You have to continuously pay any type of lead gen service forever in order to get results. And on top of that, it's going to be inconsistent. So you're not really going to get that consistency anyways. So there's going to be a lot of periods where you're paying, but you're not really getting anything on the back of that. And once you stop paying, let's say you've canceled it, you haven't really taken anything for the long term, right? There's nothing that's been built into your business as a system that's beyond what the lead gen service is doing. So these are the reasons why the lead gen services continuously fail, and also why it has a major negative impact on advisors' businesses. Because once you stop paying, that system is gone. There's nothing you've taken for the long term. And that inconsistency just really kills businesses because you have no predictability on where your next prospect is going to come from. It creates a lot of desperation, and the low quality leads make it very, very difficult to even move forward in the first place. So overall, before we kind of go forward from this, like the one thing that every single lead gen model has in common is that they skip the relationship. That's the summary here. The outreach that actually works, it's going to embrace the differentiating factor, which is you individually as an advisor. You have to embrace something that makes you unique as an advisor, which in most cases is something to do with your relationship with your prospects, right? I talk about this all the time with every advisor that I've either worked with or spoken to generally. And it always comes down to the fact that nobody really works with their advisor because of the technical capabilities or because they think they're amazing at understanding the markets. It's some sort of relationship that you uniquely have with that person that makes them trust you as their advisor, right? And the disconnect that happens is obviously in treating your prospects in one way, which is very surface level without a relationship, versus what your clients actually have, which is that deep relationship with you, right? And the prospecting doesn't start from when you get on a call with them or when you meet them in person. It happens much before that, which is what these lead gen services talk about. So what happens, again, as I'm saying on that same topic, is that when you have a lead gen service that hasn't built a relationship from the very first contact, anything between the first contact to when you sign someone as a client matters, right? There's nothing like individual about it. Every step of the process compounds and every single thing you say matters. And so if you break credibility at any point in that, if you haven't built a relationship, if there's no trust built, that's going to affect the next step. It doesn't matter if they're on your second, third, fourth, or fifth call with you. Anything before that hasn't built enough of a relationship will hurt you in the long run. And that's a common problem with why the lead quality suffers so much on any of these lead gen services. Cool. So now let's dive specifically into some examples and just really breaking down the specifics around why all of these models consistently fail for wealth advisors. So the first one, automation agencies, right? Like there's a lot of tools that are built specifically for advisors that really talk about scale and playing the volume game. So what they'll have is a lot of volume. They're going to attach your name to it, which really destroys your credibility. But this is generally speaking the way that it works. They'll send generic pitches. They might automate cold email outreach, LinkedIn DM sequences, whatever the case may be, and it's sold as a way to prospect at scale. Biggest myth in prospecting and financial advisory is that volume is the way to go. When you're actually doing outreach, you don't need 1,000 people to hear your message. You need the right people to hear a strong message. And that doesn't mean that, one specific template or one specific conversation. It's the real trust and relationship that you're able to build with that prospect. So I'm not saying that you're going to go out there and build a relationship with 1 million people online every single day, but if you bring down your numbers, you have a real relationship and people who actually care and trust you specifically, you're going to stand out from all the other advisors, and you're actually going to show that person that you care about them individually, and you're not just doing the same thing for every single other person. So again, as I said, it comes across salesy because that's really all it is. It's just kind of spamming and pitching. Every single advisor has tried it to some point, whether you're doing it on your own and copy and pasting, you're using some type of automation service online, and almost all of them will not get any results, right? And even if you do, it's just, you got a little bit of luck here and there, right? You may have gotten one person who had some interest and you got lucky that you came across them, but in the end, there's no consistency because when you're relying on luck, you don't know when that next person is going to come, right? And that's the biggest problem. So if I bring up like one specific example here, this is the type of message that you'll probably get from one of these automation services. And this is one that I actually received, which is funny considering, what I do. So obviously just kind of going through saying, I'm a financial advisor. If you have questions about whatever X, Y, and Z pain points, we can set up a Zoom call. The biggest mistake, and without getting too much into the actual DM strategy, you can check out some of my other videos for that. The biggest mistake is assuming that the goal of a lead gen service or the goal of just getting leads online is to set just any call, right? It's not about getting people on a call for no reason. It's about getting the right people on a qualified call that have a problem, interested in solving it, and understanding of your relationship with them. When you have that, that's when people are even going to be open to getting on the calls in the first place. And even if you do manage to get people on a call without any of that relationship or interest, it's really going to be a waste of your time, right? You have to start from scratch. And a lot of times you're going to get no shows. You're going to get people that aren't really qualified and aren't going to move forward. So that's one mindset change that's definitely required that a lot of automation agencies lack is if you offer that call from the very beginning, first of all, it's 2026. People don't really want to get on calls with strangers for no reason. So you have to really break that barrier. And that comes from building a lot of trust. Here's an example of just like one type of way to start a conversation. This is obviously LinkedIn specific. Again, you can get into my other videos if you want to see more examples of the strategy. But when you start a conversation, you want to make it seem like you are just a genuine person. And it's not about a trick or It's not about portraying something. You have to be that type of person, right? You want to be the advisor that comes across to every single person as a caring advisor, someone who genuinely just wants to learn about their life, about their business before ever offering any help, right? The mindset I tell every advisor I work with is you can't assume you can help someone without knowing anything about them. When we say having a niche or having one specific ideal client profile, it's not about just choosing one, right? It's about finding the people that you're going to talk to where they see that you resonate with their space, that you know their world, that you understand their life. That's what moves people forward. And yeah, I mean, this obviously starts a lot more conversations. And let me actually even pull up an example here in a second. Okay, so I actually just put this on here live because I thought it's such a great example and I remembered this coming up. But this is a message that one of the advisors I work with got from a prospect, right? Basically just saying that out of the dozen or so advisors to contact me, you actually took the time to have a conversation and you're local. I have connections on here who are friends in real life that work at Morgan Stanley who haven't taken the time to talk with me. So I appreciate it. And then he ends up booking in a call with this prospect who ends up being a great prospect for him. But this is literally the perfect example, right? Because when you have a real conversation with people and when you build a real relationship, prospects resonate with that, right? That you stand out from all the other advisors that are using lead gen services, that are just kind of blasting out pitches, that are being very generic and obviously not seeing much success as a result. So I wanted to show you this example because this is why the relationship-based kind of mindset works so well. And also the reason why lead gen services consistently fail. Okay, so moving into some other models that are very, very common, buying leads and cold calling lists, right? So again, it's a different type of packaging, but in the end, you're doing the same exact thing. There's no real pain point. There's no real relationship being built. So for example, the way that they normally work, someone's going to opt into a form for a free resource. The service is going to technically qualify that person as a lead. They never really had interest in an advisor. They just wanted to get like some type of form or some type of resource. And that's what leads to a lot of low quality leads, right? They're going to have no shows, people with low interest, etc. Cold calling lists, a lot of the ways they'll work is you literally just go onto LinkedIn and find a bunch of people and give them a ring, and they may say that they're interested in having another chat. And that's why, again, they're going to no show a lot of times. You don't really know where their interest comes from. So again, what happens is like you're just finding random names. Even a book call doesn't mean much because it's very short. There's no real relationship being built, and there was never a pain point that actually pushes them forward. So generally speaking, as I said, like the way these services work is you'll pay a couple $1,000s a month. You may pay per lead or you may pay per qualified lead, whatever the case may be. But you also have to consistently pay them over and over again to actually get that, result, right? Until you get that, you're never going to move, you're never going to build anything for the long term if you stop paying them. It's going to have that no permanence, basically. Here's an example of one of the clients I've worked with. Obviously, like we can get into like what exactly our strategy was, but really the biggest piece is that his ideal clients are residents that are transitioning to attending doctors, and he understands their problem and their stage of life deeply because he was in the healthcare space before and he works with plenty of them. He worked with a lead gen agency who cold call off LinkedIn. I'm not going to name names, but it's a very popular one that if you're an advisor watching this, you've definitely heard of before. They set calls that had less than 50% show rate and very, very low interest. So even though they were technically setting calls, they're technically getting prospects on the phone, the prospects had no interest in actually moving forward, and he got no clients with them over 6+ months. And they were with tech prospects because lead gen service said that the medical field is too hard or too complicated to actually get calls with. So in the end, like it's not with ideal clients. They're very low quality. They're not going to show up on calls. They're not interested in moving forward. So then he canceled the lead gen service within the span of just a few weeks. He signed his first ever attending doctor client off of LinkedIn, a couple other like residents as well. He's able to use his knowledge to book discovery calls consistently. And he has a pipeline of real ideal prospects in his ideal niche that comes from that. And it doesn't come from playing the volume game or cold calling them or trying to be efficient, right? It's really about building targeted relationships and actually using those to move them into clients. So that's just one example of why that can work so well. Now moving on to the next section, the real problem underneath all of these models, right? The main mindset that a lot of advisors fail that I mentioned a little bit earlier is that successful outreach isn't just something that books calls. It's the one that actually signs clients with consistency, right? So I'm sure every single advisor watching this is going to resonate with the fact that book calls on your calendar means absolutely nothing if they don't move into clients, right? And so if you have 100 calls, none of them turn into actual clients, obviously it's a little bit extreme, but let's just say comparing 100 calls to with just 5 calls with 2 of them turning into clients, obviously we know which one you would pick, right? And that's really the mindset shift that a lot of these lead gen services forget, because when you play volume, when you're trying to get calls, if they're all low quality and they have low interest and they're not showing up, then you're not going to move the needle forward. If any lead gen service worked, any advisor could use them to grow their book, right? The industry has a 90% failure rate. It's obviously very difficult, but the outreach that works is embraces the only unique factor that you have in this industry, which is you, right? Every advisor, as I said earlier, has a reason that their clients work with them and not someone else. And your outreach has to embrace it. It can't just pitch and spam at scale, because then you'll get washed into the noise. Then you're going to sound like every other advisor. And obviously not just every other advisor, but the majority of advisors are not going to see much success in general as unfortunate as it may be. But this is a big reason why. And obviously, I'll get into the common misconceptions in a second. But really just breaking down like the problem underneath all of these models in the lead gen space is that if you're using volume and you're pitching, that's really just spam. That's what you're going to come across as. If you're spamming under your firm's name or your own name, you're going to damage your credibility. That's a big problem that I hear from advisors over and over again, is that they're really afraid of damaging their credibility. And obviously, once you add time into that, you're just not going to grow, right? It's going to prevent your growth moving forward. The other piece here is that the kind of similar to what I mentioned earlier, every single contact before a prospect becomes a client matters and impacts the relationship, right? Each stage in the funnel, it's not independent of each other. They all matter. So for example, you start with your initial contact, you have a conversation, maybe you found a pain point, when you're offering them help, when you're going through your discovery process, when you're closing, every single one of these steps is not independent of each other, right? Something that you said in the initial contact is going to come up in offering help, right? It's not a game. That's just how human nature works. Something I say to somebody today, it's going to definitely impact their perception of me a few days, a few years, whatever, distance away from now, right? So that's something that you really have to keep in mind when you're treating your prospecting, is that you can't expect, like, even if you have like okay prospecting in the beginning, but you've damaged your credibility, or maybe it's been a little bit salesy, or you haven't built enough of a relationship, that's not just going to go away even if you somehow get them to the next step, right? That can come back and hurt you at the very last step when they realize that, I'm not really sure. If somebody has doubts before, signing on with you as a client, then honestly, it might just come back to the fact that they don't have a strong enough relationship with you, which could have started from the very first time you talked to them. So that's a really important mindset to keep in mind as well, because advisors who struggle with lead quality, they assume the call is where the process starts, when in reality, everything before that is arguably even more important. So really getting into these common misconceptions as well, like when we talk about building relationships with prospects, the most common one is that it takes too much time, right? Again, time is the most relative thing ever, right? Obviously, again, the example that I gave, if you spend no time on it and you book 100 calls and maybe get one client or two clients here and there, that's obviously much worse than maybe getting 10 calls and closing 4 people as a client, right? So you want to focus on the most high leverage area of your prospecting, which comes from a strategy that's actually going to be effective, right? Even if you're spending more time on it, if it's delivering you more results, obviously that's very logical. That's more leverage. Looking for the cheapest option. I mean, that's a very simple mindset to have. I mean, especially for advisors, like you would think that obviously the kind of idea of value and investing into their business is more obvious, but you'll see it a lot, right? Like obviously when you're analyzing the markets or when you're analyzing budgets, you know that you get into the mindset of kind of looking for the cheaper option. When in reality, when it comes to lead gen, the cheapest option means the cheapest quality, right? And so I've heard this from advisors over and over again, that they took the cheap route when it came to an automation agency or buying leads or whatever the case may be. And then they got no results from it, which shouldn't really be too much of a surprise, because obviously the cheaper it is, the lower quality it's going to be. Like it's not really a myth in this space at all. And that's outside of advisors also. You can ask anybody in the marketing space, like the best brands in marketing, they will charge the most because, they're going to deliver you the most results. So even if you're not necessarily going to go for the top option, you should understand that the cheaper you're spending or the cheaper, amount of money that you're allocating towards your lead gen or your whatever type of prospecting, the quality is going to be lower. That's a fact. The other piece is waiting for future growth to fund proper outreach, right? And this just ends up being a paradox, because obviously if you're in a position where you don't have enough money to potentially allocate towards your prospecting, and you're going to say that your future growth is going to help you fix that, obviously, like if you don't have that future growth in the first place, you're not going to ever get the funds into comfortably investing into your outreach, right? That's one of the biggest problems I hear, is that, this isn't a comfortable solution. Well, what's going to happen is if you keep going with the cheap solution that is comfortable for you and that doesn't help you grow, then the uncomfortable solution is never going to be an option. So it gets a little bit confusing, but it's logically speaking a paradox, because obviously if you never have the money to invest in the first place and you're right now not growing, if you keep not growing, you're never going to get that money back to reinvest into your business, right? So it's one of those things that is a common misconception and really holds a lot of people back, because you kind of want to go with the most comfortable route. Obviously, that's natural. Actually, check out the video I made just before this. It's kind of about why 90% of advisors fail. It explains this in a lot more depth in terms of the mindset behind not understanding how to actually make investments. But this is a very, very common paradox that really holds advisors back, in the sense of waiting for future growth to pay for their current growth, which obviously doesn't really make sense. That's overall kind of why these factors don't really work. I can get into this a little bit as well, but as I said, like your reputation is going to be damaged every time something automated or, some type of bad conversation happens under your name where it's very pitchy or spammy. The same group that you're meant to serve, right? They may start not feeling that you actually understand their space, because if you're kind of being pitchy, if you're being very generic, they're going to feel like you don't actually know them, which obviously damages your credibility there. Client acquisition, it actually is the skill that builds a book, right? Like if you hand it off in a very generic manner, whether that's a cheap lead gen service or handing it off to someone who's not very experienced with it, it's going to harm your book, because if you don't have that piece solved, then you can't move on to the next part, which is maybe helping your clients the best way possible or whatever the case may be. But it has to be something that really embraces who you are as a person. And obviously, like a lot of the advisors who do fail, it's probably because they haven't mastered the prospecting side of things. And again, just to recap, like the biggest thing to keep in mind is that lead quality doesn't start with getting somebody on a call or even any part of that sales process. It starts with the very first contact, and every single piece in between the first contact to the end is what matters in that prospecting. So just moving on to the last section here, what separates advisors who actually own their pipeline, right? Like again, when you're working the lead gen service, you're not actually owning or building any type of system of your own. When you stop paying them, that's all gone and everything that you built is theirs, unless you hopefully got some clients from it. But even then, that's obviously not actually building an outreach system. The advisors who actually grow are the ones that build the capability themselves before ever delegating it, right? Like you can't really delegate a skill that you don't have. So eventually, right, what's going to happen is you're paying for convenience instead of actually learning it. You may be renting a pipeline. You're going to let automated spam erode the trust that you have. The actual way to kind of approach this type of solution where, instead of outsourcing your entire voice, if you're learning a skill, you can allow that system to compound and then you own the pipeline, right? You're not renting out your pipeline. You're not being afraid that maybe the lead gen service, or if you cancel that service, your pipeline is going to come crashing down. It's because it embraces the unique factor, which is you, right? Like that's your only edge in the market as an advisor. That's what prospects are going to see when they're working with you instead of somebody else. And so when you're embracing that, that allows you to really own the pipeline that you have. So yeah, overall, like this is just kind of a graphic that goes through that, right? Like obviously if you're going to keep paying for leads or keep paying for outreach, if you decide to build a relationship skill instead of like trying to outsource that, you can build the skill over time. That's going to compound. All the conversations will compound and then you own it forever, right? Because when you learn a skill, nobody can prevent you from moving forward. So yeah, overall, like a relationship that you build yourself keeps paying back long after it's built, compared to kind of some of the lead gen services, which obviously ignores, as I explained, the individual factor, which is the relationship that you want to build with your prospects, right? That's a very common misconception. Overall, obviously, like when we actually talk about owning your pipeline, some of the advisors that I've worked with, I'll explain what we do in a very simple format. Obviously, you can get into some of my other videos to understand that. It's not a lead gen service. It's not automations or anything like that. Really, the focus is on building the skills behind having conversations. I'll go back to this example here. The skill behind conversations like this, where you build a relationship with prospects, you understand how to ask questions that actually uncover problems, and you can consistently and repeatedly do it over and over again. That's the number one factor because, again, one of the things we talked about here, a common problem with lead gen services is a lack of consistency. That makes it very difficult to actually predict and move your business forward. So when you learn the skill, which is an actual system that can repeat in conversations over and over again, you don't have to worry about that lack of consistency because you can have a repeatable pipeline. Obviously, in terms of how we do it, we can chat about that. If you want to book a call with me below, then we can get into that as well. Some of the results with advisors I work with, obviously, I mentioned Justin there above. But just as an example, when you really master your niche and you really master the relationship-based strategy that finds problems your prospects are facing. One of these advisors, he's, RA from the Bay Area. I actually made a whole video about him. You can check that out. He added 10 million in 90 days. A lot of advisors from different types of broker dealers. He adds 4 clients a month and he works with a pretty high net worth niche. Advisors that are very early on in their careers booking true discovery calls with their prospects and, signing 4 to 5 of those clients a month. Some other wins from just current clients that I have that are actually able to sign clients consistently on LinkedIn. And obviously, like, these are just some of the firms that I work with. Again, like, I won't run through all of these, but really the biggest factor with lead gen services and why they fail is because it's all about not having like the time to spend on your outreach. But as a result of that, you're not actually going to allocate the proper amount of relationship that's required in order to build that, right? When you're renting out a pipeline and you don't own it, it makes it very, very difficult to actually build something long-term that's going to stay and compound inside of your business. And it doesn't embrace the unique factor, which is you. Again, I've said it many, many times today, but that's really important to recognize because every single advisor is going to sound the same. If you ignore the relationship that you have with your clients, you have to build that same relationship somehow with your prospects, and being able to do it for a cold outreach, stranger basically on the internet, which is obviously what we talk about with LinkedIn. Being able to do that efficiently, that's what builds you a pipeline that just compounds consistently. So if you want to explore that, see how we can maybe potentially help you learn those skills on your own, you can book a call with me down below. And then, we can chat about that further. But hopefully this video was helpful in understanding why some of your experiences with lead gen services may have failed you in the past. And hopefully it can also help you make some changes and approach outreach better in the future.